to Talking with Springfield Township. Today we're in Beech Grove Cemetery to talk with Mike Gould about what the township has been doing out here to make this a better place.
Beech Grove Cemetery has some unique history in of itself. The cemetery was established back in the late 1800s. It's one of the first historically black African American cemeteries here in Ohio. You have war veterans, up to about 520 veterans buried here at Beech Grove Cemetery, and they date back all the way to World War I. The cemetery has changed hands from an ownership perspective a number of times. Each time it changed hands, liens against the property increased, to the point in 2012, Bethel A&E Church, who owned the cemetery at the time, were ready to walk away from the property. In order to take action, in order to come in here, cut the grass, provide the maintenance that was needed for the property, clean up the trash, those things, the only choice the Board of Trustees had was to declare the property a nuisance. This allowed township resources and staffing to come in, cut the grass, do those things. Unfortunately, some of the remaining repairs, leaning headstones, stuff like that, could not be performed until the township took ownership in 2018. During that 6 years of time, Board of Trustees, Township Law Director, and Administrator worked collaboratively with the state representatives to pass legislation that would allow that debt to be forgiven and not passed on to local governments once they inherited a cemetery.
I'm Tim Price, the GIS Director at RA Consultants. And after Mike contracted us out here, we had an initial meeting out here to look at the cemetery, because I'd never been here before, and determine our best course of action. And they come out here and they have a GPS unit receiver attached to a backpack. They come over to each one of the headstones here, and literally they drop a point. So it puts a point on the map of where that headstone is at. And then we take a photograph of that headstone so that loved ones can go back and look at it later online. And from there we can determine whether that person was a married couple, whether it was a single person, whether they were military or not. And we enter all that database, or all that information, into a database and go from there. And from after that, we go ahead and we map that out and put it onto an online map, which is now available on the Springfield Township website. So, and there they can search by, last name, first name. They basically type in a last name. They get a drop-down list that shows them exactly, what those first names are. And they can click on their loved one's name, and it'll drop them right where their headstone is. And then they can go ahead and look at the attachment, which would be the cemetery headstone. But they could also, the township could upload other documents too at some point if they want to do. Like, for example, the actual record of that burial. For genealogy and stuff, that's great. Now we've entered into a new phase with that, where we're looking actually at the actual records to determine, right now, GPS can only see where there's a headstone at. But records tell you that, well, there's a big blank spot in between here. We're pretty sure somebody's buried here. So we go back and look at those records then, and now we can put an estimation of where that person should be, and mark on there who the loved one is that should be there, even though they don't have a headstone. I mean, it's a big cemetery, and again, we can only see the headstones, but there are many, many blank spots in between here. And we just did one small section in the back part of the cemetery, section 5, and based on that, we've already found over 500 people that don't have headstones. And that was just one small little section. And our online map will show that. It should have different color coding and dots and things. The green, of course, is just a headstone. Blue would be a military headstone. And a purple is, based on the records, this is where your loved one should be.
One of the challenges that the township has faced since taking ownership of the property is the fact that about once a month we get contacted by family members who have property, they own plots here at the cemetery, and their loved ones have passed away, and they would like for the township to perform the opening and closing for that. What we require from them is the actual deed, or a copy of that deed, or some type of proof of ownership that they own the plot. Once that has been confirmed, either on our end or theirs, then we go ahead and schedule the opening and closing. Unfortunately, because of the poor records that were turned over to the township, sometimes that can take up to 6 to 8 hours meeting with the family. It can be quite the challenge. Moving forward, by the end of 2019, here at Beech Grove Cemetery, the township is going to install what's called a columbarium niche. Loved ones, family members that don't own plots here at the cemetery will have the opportunity to purchase a columbarium niche, and when either themselves or someone within their family dies, they'll be able to put their cremains in the columbarium niche, and it'll be a permanent structure here at the township. The township plans to take the revenue and the money produced from the columbarium niche and invest it back into the cemetery by resetting headstones, paving the driveways, other infrastructure needs that still need to be done. In our short tenure here in owning the property, a story that comes to mind that is kind of a highlight of the many challenges that we have faced with this property is the name Mr. Holcomb. Mr. Holcomb has a number of family members buried here in the backside of Beech Grove Cemetery. He reached out to us on a number of occasions asking for if we could provide assistance to him in locating his loved ones. Unfortunately, his loved ones don't have a headstone. So while Tim and his team weren't actually able to precisely identify where his family is buried, we were able to use the GPS tracking and the records that we have on file and work collaboratively with Tim's team, Mr. Holcomb, and everyone to actually show Mr. Holcomb where his mom and dad are buried, and even also his brother and sister, which was huge. It was absolutely huge. Gwen McFarland, our trustee, was out here when we were able to reveal that to Mr. Holcomb. He got quite emotional and has, to this date, is very appreciative. Mr. Holcomb is battling some illnesses, and he wasn't aware of how much longer he would be here with us, and that was something that he needed in order to provide closure. When the township acquired the property in 2018, our first and foremost priority was to make the property safe. We wanted to ensure that all visitors or anyone that visited the cemetery were safe when they came here to pay their respects to their loved one. Following that, we wanted to take an inventory of the assets, the people that were buried here at the cemetery. Unfortunately, the records, the paperwork, the documentation sent over to us by the church was fairly unorganized. Much of it was damaged through floods that they had there at the church, other events that had occurred. So it was virtually impossible for us to make sense of what we were inheriting. Tim and his team have come on board. They have spent many hours here at the cemetery, GPS tracking all the different headstones, and now they're in the process of going through the records that we do have and that we can make out in order to figure out the people that are buried here but yet don't have headstones.